Shot calls for the Rugby World Cup squads thus far, folks. We've got multiple squads already up for the Rugby World Cup. England, New Zealand, Australia, Argentina, South Africa, Samoa, Fiji. All these squads are out. But who are the most kind of shocking either omissions or additions to the squads? We'll go through 5 guys from the squads thus far. And you guys can let us know your thoughts on who you reckon is also a kind of pretty surprising one. Is it the 3 South African guys that have been left out? The injured fellas and Pollard, and Diaka? Is it Akira Ioane, who's on the Weet-Bix commercials over here in New Zealand but hasn't made the squad? Is it Michael Hooper, who's doing the promotional shots for the Rugby World Cup jerseys for Australia? We'll go through them, and as I said, you guys can let us know your thoughts. Have written up a piece for Planet Rugby for this one, so check the link down in the description to Planet Rugby. There's a plethora of rugby content going on there at the moment with the World Cup on the horizon, so yeah, certainly a good resource to check out. Number 5, I am going to write, and I'm just going to write his initials, Isaac Fines Lelawasa. Addition rather than omission from the Wallabies squad. Now, you might be asking yourself, if you don't follow Super Rugby, who on earth is Isaac Fines Lelawasa? And even if you follow Super Rugby and you've never really seen the Force playing, you'd probably be forgiven for saying, who's Isaac Fines Lelawasa? Well, he's an additional halfback or scrum half into the Wallaby squad. He is uncapped, and remember, Eddie Jones did include a number of uncapped guys, but with the uncapped guys, he tended to go young, 25 and younger. I mean, Jorgensen's only like 18, but Fines Lelawasa is about 27. So far from kind of some young bolter who you're building experience with for the next World Cup. I mean, at 27, you could certainly get another World Cup in you if you are going to take that kind of step up. But this guy's had a very unconventional path to Test rugby, which makes his call-up for a Rugby World Cup kind of surprising. Like, he played for the Western Force when they were kicked out of Super Rugby, playing in the Global Rapid Rugby Championship. And then he played for the Brumbies as a kind of halfback and wing utility bench player for the most part. And then he moved back to the Western Force, where he has been getting some starts for the Western Force, and he sometimes plays from the bench. He was a part of Eddie's kind of wider training squad initially. So maybe it's not totally left field that he gets into the squad, but he wasn't a part of the Rugby Championship squad proper. He is uncapped, and even in the Australia A side he played in against Tonga, he was on the bench for that one. So he has surpassed at least Ryan Lonergan, who was kind of ahead of him in the pecking order, and Jake Gordon, who ended up getting cast and was going to go off to France for a short-term contract. But so his rise, kind of at his age, and his path into the squad has certainly been unconventional. And the fact that he's a Western Force player. He's the only Western Force player in the squad. Western Force players, generally under Eddie or Dave Rennie before him, they don't get picked for the Wallabies no matter what kind of form they show. So there's many surprising factors with Fines Lelawasa's selection. So he is there at number 5, but still big old congratulations to him. Number 4, I'm going to go with an omission, and it's another halfback, an old Brad Weber. Maybe I just feel that Brad Weber was a little bit hard done by the All Blacks selectors across his entire international career. I mean, he was the 3rd choice halfback for the All Blacks at the last World Cup, behind Aaron Smith and TJ Perenara. Aaron Smith is still there. Weber's spot has fallen down the pecking order. Again, maybe this was kind of telegraphed by the fact that he was left out of the Rugby Championship squad proper. He toured, like Fines Lelawasa, he toured with the B team. He toured with the All Blacks 15 when they played a couple of tests over in Japan. But he captained that side, and he played well for that side. And given that Finlay Christie, who's behind Aaron Smith in the World Cup squad, barely ever starts at 9 for the All Blacks, he did start one of the Rugby Championship games and then was kind of replaced early on in the second half by Aaron Smith. And that's when the All Blacks kind of had that comeback when all the veterans came on. And then you got Cam Roigard, who's at about 20 minutes of Test rugby. So behind Aaron Smith, we're kind of lacking a bit of that depth and experience. So you would have thought Weber kind of fits that role. I guess if Smith gets injured, then you just bring Weber straight in, because he is part of the kind of standby squad for the All Blacks. So he will be maybe next cab off the rank, and you could see him potentially going from out of the squad entirely to either starting or on the bench if the All Blacks were to get an injury. So he might leapfrog the likes of a Roy Yard, potentially, or a Finlay Christie. But his omission was, for mine it was a bit of a stinker. For some reason I had it in my mind that he was going to play himself back in, but sadly for him not to be. Third choice is another fella who you will see in the promotional materials of the Wallabies World Cup campaign, and that's Quade Cooper. Why is Quade Cooper's omission surprising? Well, it's kind of been forecast on many fronts that Carter Gordon was going to be the guy for Eddie Jones. It was kind of only a matter of when. 22 years old. Rebels, fly half has been pulling the strings for them really well and looks to have bags of potential. And sure enough, Eddie played Carter Gordon from the bench behind Quade Cooper early. You're thinking Quade Cooper with all those test caps, 80-odd test caps, into his 30s, seasoned World Cup campaign veteran, is going to be there. Either he's going to be there as the starting guy as Carter Gordon gets more experience, or, given that Carter Gordon did start, towards the end of the Wallabies, pre-World Cup campaign, Rugby Championship, maybe Quade goes as the backup. Maybe Carter Gordon is the guy, and then if Gordon gets himself into a bit of hot water or a situation that needs a bit of a cool, experienced head, then you bring on Quade to maybe see out a match, final 20 minutes or something like that. He's, as I said, been photographed in that Rugby World Cup jersey for the Wallabies, but doesn't make the squad. And they've only essentially taken the one specialist 10 in Carter Gordon, which is unusual in itself. The All Blacks have got 3. England have got 3. But the Wallabies just 1. And Ben Donaldson, who actually I would say, if I had to give him a position, it'd probably be 10. But he also plays 15, so they've listed him as a utility. And he's got 2 caps, and he's about, 24. So, yes. Quade Cooper's omission, in the scheme of things, pretty surprising for the Wallabies. But, the fact that I've got more than one Wallaby on here is not surprising. Number 2, it's our first kind of Northern Hemisphere player, an old Alex Dombrandt. Now, I've watched a decent amount of the Premiership, but admittedly not enough in the most recent season just gone. But I will say that from what I've seen when Harlequins play, and you've got the likes of Esterhuizen and Marcus Smith and Danny Kerr and Alex Dombrandt all kind of working together in that spine of the team, they look pretty good. They seem to kind of have that kind of telepathic relationship. Dombrandt will put in a big carry and he'll offload to a charging Esterhuizen, or Marcus Smith will put Dombrandt onto a charging line. He'll bust into a tackle, and that form saw Dombrandt get himself into the England squad. And remember, it's been a pretty competitive jersey, number 8 in England, with Billy V as the kind of initial incumbent guy, and then Sam Simmons at times just looking like one of the best players in the world for the Chiefs. He's been almost unstoppable from close range at times. He does things other guys just don't seem to have the ability to do, old Sam Simmons. But Dombrandt, to his credit, man, he managed to get himself to the top of the pecking order. And why do I think it's surprising that he didn't make the squad? Well, not because he's... How do I put this? He's not been able to perform at the same level for England as he has for Quins. That much I have noticed. Like, I run stats all the time, and I look at his stats and go, doesn't break that many tackles for England. England's attack under Steve Borthwick generally has not looked kind of flash in terms of, scoring lots of tries, getting lots of clean breaks, breaking lots of tackles. It's kind of not been the order of the day, and that's one of the things you kind of pick a guy like Alex Dombrandt for. But they kept picking him. I would have thought, if you pick a guy... Didn't he start pretty much every Six Nations match? And the match before they picked the squad, Alex Dombrandt was the starting number 8. So to go from that to outside the 33 entirely just seems like a massive drop to me. I get if you're not happy with him, maybe you play Billy V like they mentioned and bringing him into the squad, but it does seem peculiar that he's not even made the 33. I guess they had to make calls but one specialist, number 8 in the England squad. It's an interesting call. And certainly Dombrandt's stocks fell rapidly and far. So I do feel for him a bit there. Number 1, though, I think it's kind of no shock who we would say is the biggest shock. And it's another Wallaby. And it's Michael Hooper. Speaking of guys who are full of the kind of promo shots for the World Cup, I mentioned it at the top of the piece. Michael Hooper, man, he's the Wallabies captain as soon as Eddie Jones takes over. He co-captains the side alongside James Slipper. Now, admittedly, if you're looking for telltale signs of a potential dropping, he gets injured, which is obviously not ideal. And in Super Rugby, he didn't necessarily look like the best player in his position. Fraser McCright, I think, genuinely looked the best Aussie Open side across Super Rugby. But like 125 caps and a decade's worth of experience and service for the Wallabies to be dropped. And the reason being given is largely because he's injured, despite the fact that you pick a guy like Max Jorgensen, who's missed weeks of rugby injured and is still not fit and has seemingly a pretty similar recovery time, albeit I guess an 18-year-old has maybe a quicker recovery time than a 30, how old is Michael Hooper, 30 to 31-year-old? Different injuries, but you know what I mean. But it just seems a bizarre one. If you just want to have a change and you're sick of the old guard going out and putting in brave performances and losing, because how many times has Michael Hooper looked amazing on a Wallabies team which gets kind of unluckily beaten or just well beaten sometimes? Hooper generally looked pretty good most games he played, even when the Wallabies didn't look that flash. Michael Hooper's there, so I do feel for him as well. That's a pretty gutting one because, like I said, all that service he's given through thick and thin for the Wallabies, and he doesn't make it. I mean, you could argue the same with Brad Weber to a much lesser extent, just in terms of guys who've stayed loyal and whatnot. But it's kind of a brutal way for those guys to go out. But maybe that's the deal in sports. It's not a place for loyalty. But yeah, it's just tough. It's tough. But 5 shocks. There will be more as more squads come out. The Irish squad still to come out. The French one, I mean, most of the Six Nations squads, to be fair, have come out. The Rugby Championship squads are all out with Argentina and whatnot. Cordero got dropped from that squad. So there's been other kind of big surprises too. But yes, these are 5 for mine. You could also go with more inclusions. David Havili being included was certainly, one of the bolts in New Zealand because he didn't feature in the Rugby Championship, but he still managed to make the squad. Iskarol for the Pumas goes from like 1 cap at test level, playing for 7s, and then suddenly he's going to a World Cup. So, yeah, there's been kind of lots of ups and downs. But anyway, you guys let us know your thoughts. Link to the Planet Rugby article down in the description. And, I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.